Welcome to another special and probably sad episode of the Future of Money podcast. As you guys know, normally I do this podcast and I share it with you all about some of the latest developments we're seeing in the field of crypto. But today is one episode I wish I never had to do, and is one that I hope I'll never have to do again. As many of you know, and I've been sharing this as much as I can over my various social media platforms, is I've been getting a lot of scammers impersonate me. And I know that people have been scammed now for dozens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars in the last couple of years. And we've been really trying to do everything that we can for having to have this stop. And we'll share more about this podcast. But today, what's special is we have actually a victim, David, who's coming on the show, who really was a recent victim of my scam. And he really had the courage to come on the show and share with us not only how the scammers operated, but also the techniques they used. And really, we're going to share with you all some practical, literally even screenshots for those of you watching this on YouTube of how the scammers were communicating and conducting their scam, really with the goal that, you guys are all empowered and do not fall victim to some of these bastards that we have in the crypto ecosystem. And I want to also, we have on the show today, Arda as well. I'll introduce you in a second, who's the crypto threat analyst at Elliptic. Who Arda really graciously, when this events were taking place a couple of weeks ago, really accepted, and Elliptic as well, by the way. Really, so hats off to the Elliptic team as well, who really came and allowed us to trace the money that the coins that David had to deposit. And we'll cover all these during the show, and Arda will share some of his experience as well, how they were able to actually trace some of these transactions as well. So David and Arda, thank you very much for being on the show. And I think Arda, you're joining us from London, and David, you're joining us from San Francisco. David, before I really want to start with the show with focusing on you. Obviously, we've known each other for many years. We've been friends, acquaintances, actually, especially via the Armenian community globally. I last saw you probably many places around the world, I think from Beirut to San Francisco to Paris to Armenia. And I have to say, I woke up one morning from a message from you, and basically you're saying, "Hey, Henri, I've been corresponding with you on Instagram, but I just want to make sure this is you." And at that moment, I was like, another victim. And, and I think I wanted to share the story with our audience. But one thing I'll say is I've had many people get scammed over the last couple of months. And I have to emphasize that I've been reaching out to Twitter many, many times, and they refuse to this day to verify the account. I reached out to Instagram many times to verify the account, and they refuse to do so. And I actually had other victims as well. But David, you were the first one who had the courage and the guts to come and actually share the story of how you got scammed. And I really appreciate that for you. So David, thanks for having me on the show. And can you maybe, for the benefit of our audience, share with them, how did this all happen? How did this scam happen, and how did it happen, so people can be aware of some of the steps that took place?
Sure, absolutely. Henri, thank you so much for having me. First of all, I do wish it was under different circumstances to be on your podcast. And I just want to congratulate you for all of your success in this realm. And it's been really amazing to witness your presence in this field. And it's just really cool to say, hey, I know him, consider him a friend. So these scammers, at least in my case, they didn't know that I actually have a relationship with you as a friend, colleague in the Armenian community, through the AGBU, a global nonprofit, and beyond, because they don't know, these scammers don't know that I actually have a close enough relationship with you to hopefully we can bring these guys down. But in my case, I fell victim because of my connection to you and thinking that this was really you. And so ultimately, I fell victim of all the red flags that there were, because all along I'm thinking, wow, maybe, is this really Henri? Is this really Henri? This can't really be Henri, right? So randomly, I get a message from the fake Henri Arslanian account on Instagram. On Instagram, excuse me. Asking, hey, how's crypto market treating you? And I'm like, oh, wow, cool. Like, Henri hit me up. This is cool. And so like, I'm corresponding thinking it's you. And now look, there's when we get to screenshots, it'll be clear. Instagram, there's certain views on Instagram on the message platform, the messaging, that don't show you the @ handle or the @ name of the Instagram user. So I'm seeing Henri Arslanian with your name spelled properly. And so I'm corresponding with this person. It was for weeks upon weeks, seeing your name, not seeing the fake handle. It wasn't until later that I noticed the fake handle, and I was like, wait a minute. And then that further verified all the red flags that were there. But he caught me reaching out by reaching out that way, and we're corresponding. And then one thing led to another, where he starts inviting me to join this platform. It's called grandinvestmentonline.com. And I'm like, okay, this is interesting. Starts telling me all these gains that are possible and everything. So I sign up. And then I didn't make a deposit right. It wasn't right away. I was kind of holding off. And this is kind of weird. So then finally, he convinces me to go make a deposit. And again, I'm thinking this is you, but I'm still a little skeptical all along. So I'm like, okay, I'll start with $500 just to see. Actually, I think I started with $200. I'm like, okay, I'm just going to see how this works. And the scam was largely through BTC machines, but the initial deposits, he was having me directly connect my Binance, and through using my Binance cryptocurrencies, transfer directly online over to their fraudulent platform and the crypto wallets they had on that platform. And then Binance has a 10-day hold, and when you make deposits, so there was a delay on that. So then that's why he was kind of encouraging me to go and use the BTC machines, because it's instant, right? It's more instantaneous.
So just on that point, David, just to stop you there for a second. So basically, these scammers contacted you on Instagram. You thought it was me. And from what you shared as well, like they were asking you about your trading records. And from what you told me as well previously, they were marketing crazy returns. Like it was something like 10,000% a month, something stupid like that, which I wish I could generate, by the way, but unfortunately I can't. And then obviously what was interesting is they were asking you to make the deposit via these Bitcoin ATM machines, right?
Exactly.
So, and can you explain how the process works? So you went to the Bitcoin ATM machine, you're in San Francisco, I'm sure there's tons of them, and the transactions were in Bitcoin, right?
Exactly. So everything was in Bitcoin from the BTC machines, and they had specific crypto wallets, which we've shared. And Arda, thank you for tracking them and everything. So there was a couple. There was one that was attached to my account that I set up online, this fake fraudulent account. And then there was others that he sent me, all QR codes, and there's screenshots of that, which we could share. He would send a QR code. So initially I'm depositing directly into the account that's quote unquote on my fake platform account that I created. And then he shifted, having me send directly to the QR code he sent me. He said, hey, from now on, deposit to this QR code. And I'm like, okay, why? When I have my account, he said, just trust me on this. They're all connected.
So basically what they were doing, David, they were the fake platform that they made you join. That wasn't, but then in the second time, you were sending directly to the wallets of these scammers directly, basically. It was not going. And just for the benefit of our audience as well, these scammers have set up the entire fake website where they even asked, David, correct me if I'm wrong, whether you had a long-term investment portfolio, short-term investing portfolio, and they had basically a whole portal that was ready, basically.
Absolutely. They had this whole scam. And since you mentioned that, when I signed up, and tragically, I got my father and my sister involved, and I really regret that, but I'm glad that they were more skeptical. Okay. I'm really glad they were even more skeptical, because their investment was less than mine. And again, in the scheme of things, I feel fortunate that I didn't really invest as much as other scams that have been out there. There's people that have lost hundreds of thousands, whole life savings. Fortunately for mine, it was, it's a significant amount. It was 15,000, but I feel grateful that it was not more than that, And so when I set up the account, a couple weeks later, this guy that I'm messaging, the fake Henri, asked me, hey, did you get an email from the platform? And I'm like, no, not that I saw. And then he's like, what about your father? And I'm like, okay, I'm not sure. I asked my dad, hey, Dad, did you get this email? I said, no, I didn't see it. So I finally go in and I search my Gmail. And sure enough, there's an email from info@grandinvestmentonline.com, which, by the way, that site is now down. That is within the last week or less that site is no longer up. But they had a very robust looking fake fraudulent platform, right? Which was connected to TradingView, by the way, tradingview.com, which is the free online charting platform, and which I use for stock and option trading, right? But they also have it for crypto, I believe. And So I finally search and I find the email. Very simple email. That alone was a red flag. Well, okay, there's no graphics in this email. It's all text. There's nothing that looks like it's from a real official platform. But again, it's just enough that you're like, okay, because it asks you, hey, it says, hey, thank you so much for investing with us. Actually, I forwarded the email to you guys. I can tell you the exact verbiage, but it's asked you, hey, what is your investing goals? What are your investing goals? Long-term or short-term? And it wants you to reply letting us know long-term or short-term. So we reply. They then send back a contract for long-term investing or short-term investing. I think thankfully I didn't send a signed contract. I was going through that process, but then I stopped. Didn't matter because I still was making deposits, right? My father never touched it, thankfully. But again, it wouldn't have mattered because, it was all fraudulent anyway.
By the way, for those of you watching this on YouTube, we're going to show the screenshots of the fake contract, which is a bit funny. It has a Bitcoin logo on top of it, and for email as well that David referred to, so you can have a sense of what was happening there. So they made you sign, David, this contract, and then obviously you were continuing to send them basically crypto over a couple. This lasted over a couple of days, weeks. How long did it last?
This is over a few months, Henry. A few months. I believe the first messages, yeah, because I delayed a lot of it early on, and then I was trying to make weekly or every other week deposits. But again, the whole time, this is supposed to be my friend Henry, right? The whole time, and so I was kind of questioning this because he would say hi, how are you, and then the first thing, hey, how's the platform going? Hey. How the deposits coming along, and that's why I feel I'm really upset at myself, Henry, for falling for it. The way I fell for it was, again, the platform was just robust enough looking, right? Instagram messages, it looks like I'm actually speaking with a Henri Arslanian, and then they show these insane gains in the platform.
Yeah, what was the gain the first month? I remember you told me it was a crazy amount, right? The fake gains.
I made $5,000 investment. My return is like $10,000 in return. And then over a really short period of time, all of a sudden it became $98,000 return. And then ultimately it got to 140 something thousand, right? But I stopped depositing. Because I caught on to this. I thank my brother-in-law for pointing it out because he had another scammer trying to scam him with similar type of language. And I was like, okay, I saw what he was saying. And also at that time, I had already seen that the Instagram handle was not accurate. It was not your name, right? It was misspelled. And so all these things I started to piece all these things together finally. And I was no longer blinded by the insane gains and the promises of returns. And I finally saw what it was for. And of course, I spoke with you at this point. And so then at that point on, it was very clear what was happening, and their whole scheme was very clear. It's just I wish I realized it sooner.
I want to come back to that, David, in a second, especially about the language that the fake Henri was using, because it was quite aggressive in many cases. And I want to come back to that in a second. But Arda, just moving it to you. I mean, you saw this David describe the scam he went through. From your perspective, obviously, as a crypto trade analyst, and you look at a lot of these cases, is this something common? Like, is this a problem that you're seeing increasingly in the broader crypto ecosystem?
First of all, David, I'm very, very sorry to hear about what you went through. And actually, to answer your question, Henri, by the way, thank you very much for having us on today. To answer your question very, very quickly, yes, it very much is something that we are seeing. In fact, in 2021, we saw about a 250% increase in the value of Bitcoin being scammed out of legitimate investors through scams like these. And in fact, David, I mean, a lot of the stuff you were describing there, a lot of those red flags you were describing there, I mean, I had actually jotted down before the show, potentially to actually bring up to make sure people also, knew about these warning signals and were able to look out for them. But I mean, you've actually put them very, very well. It's actually very, very typical that we see incredibly flashy, great user interfaces, like very, very legitimate looking sites. I mean, these aren't sites that are just, like those typical, oh, you owe some money to the IRS kind of thing, where there's a lot of typos and a lot of very clear indications that it's not a legitimate site. These are very, very professional looking, flashy sites. They work very, very well. A lot of investment goes into making them. In many cases, they will actually have some articles of incorporation from a country where it's very easy to get articles of incorporation, plastered onto their homepage just to increase that legitimacy. And a very interesting thing that we also noticed, David, and you actually said that, and I was actually quite surprised, is that in comparison, their emails are very, very unprofessional. So you will get these incredibly professional looking sites sending you emails saying, come on, invest, do this, do that. Very, very pushy emails, which look like they've just been written by someone on an iPhone and, not really, not putting much care into it. So there's really a disconnect, actually. And a lot of other typical warning signs we also see is, they're typically up for about a couple of months. I think that checks out with your story as well. They will have a very sort of generic name, Grand Investments Online, Generous Investments Limited, XYZ, all of this kind of stuff. So regrettably, this is something that we definitely do see and do help with tracing.
It's interesting on this one, Arda, because actually you would expect a lot of these scammers would be more professional on some of their communication tools, right? The emails, for example, you mentioned. If you're going through all these headaches, I guess for them it's a volume game, right? They try as many to get as many people as they can, and they'll get a couple people out of it, right? The need of being sophisticated is not a priority, I presume.
So I think my take on that is they probably have these sites externally made. And from what we've seen, because we've created accounts on these sites just to trace them, just to get their crypto addresses, for example, it's very interesting. When you log in or when you create an account, the messaging, even the sort of very small messaging that most people won't notice, account created successfully, or, check your email for a activation code. All of these messages that you sort of receive in the signing up process are exactly the same across many of these sites, which leads me to believe that they are just standard made. They're probably made externally, and they've all got the underlying code that's absolutely the same. So they just purchase one of those, and they sort of obviously because they've purchased that externally or had that made externally, but they are in charge of the emails. There's that disconnect between the professionalism in the email and the site. So what they will typically do, I suppose, is get this generic code from one of these sites, do an email, and once they're done with that particular site, retire it after a month, and then move on to the next one with a very similar sounding name, equally flashy, etc.
This podcast is brought to you by Bullish. Bullish is a powerful new exchange for digital assets that offers deep liquidity, automated market making, and state-of-the-art security. Follow Bullish on Twitter or visit bullish.com to learn more. Please note that digital assets and cryptocurrencies are high-risk products. Consult your professional advisor before dealing in them. Bullish's services are available in select locations only and not to U.S. persons. Visit bullish.com for important information and risk warnings. I think you guys highlighted a lot of the red flags there. And I want to come back to you, Arda, in a couple of seconds about talking about how you guys actually, the process and how we work together on tracing. And before that, just move it back to you, David, and talk about the language, right? I think what was interesting in the communications that you shared with me was that actually the fake Henri was very pushy with you. In many cases, I think you were asking him to say, hey, Henri, is this really you? And I was kind of insulting you, saying, how can you dare actually bring this up? There was another one where the fake Henri, again, is pushing you to deposit as soon as possible. And how is that? Do you believe the fact that you knew me, the fact that creates kind of this human kind of shame, like, oh, I don't want to look like an idiot in front of Henri, or like, I don't want to insult him, is playing in that? Are you just basically doing it without actually questioning it too much?
Absolutely. And that's what I was saying right when we started it. I think I fell victim. I think the reason I fell victim is because of actually knowing you and actually thinking if that's really you, trusting you, right? And again, so like they preyed on that, again, not knowing how much I know you or that I actually know you. And then he used that against me. I'll share, like, I had asked you a personal question. Hey, Henri, are you, where are you these days? Are you in Hong Kong? Are you in Armenia? Where are you? Happy actually knowing that you were between those two locations. Hopefully it's okay. I share that right now. And he then used that against me later on, saying, hey, he messaged me, hey, David, are you in Armenia by chance? And I'm like, oh, cool. Like, wow, like, he's actually asking if I'm there, like maybe we can meet up or whatever. And then he said, because he brought that up to try to get me to find a BTC machine. He was going to suggest a BTC machine in Yerevan. And I'm like, no, man, I'm in the Bay Area, So he's like, oh, okay, cool. Look for some BTC machines in your area. There's a lot. There's got to be a bunch in San Francisco. So like, it was all just believable enough. And again, we're all really busy. This is all messages in between doing other things, or in some cases it was really late night or early morning or whatever. So they're preying on that. They're preying on someone trusting the platform. And again, we talked about this, Henri, you mentioned at the top, trusting Instagram in the sense that, oh, this is Henri's account. This must be Henri's account. And then also because it's not verified, right? Also, and then because I couldn't see the fake handle, especially early on, and then trusting that it's you and actually knowing you personally. So absolutely that played a role. And then on top of that, there's two other things that I mentioned already. The platform itself seeming robust enough, just robust enough that, okay, this could be. It looked lower quality, right? It's not like, I trade options, I trade stock. It's not like one of those. It's not like a Fidelity or like a Tastyworks. I use Tastyworks for options, right? It's not like those, but it's just robust enough. And then on top of that, it's trusting you. It's the platform just robust enough. And then the Instagram faking me out. And then the other thing was this: everything that he said ended up turning out the way he said it would. So like he said, okay, hey, because we're supposedly this crypto exchange rate on the BTC machine. I'm like, okay, if I need to deposit $1,000, how much cash do I really need to deposit? So it's really $1,000. He gave me the exchange rate, right? So then I had to go deposit $1,200 or $1,500 or $1,700, whatever it was, and that came out to being the 1,000. Am I making sense of how I'm saying it? Like he gave me the amount to deposit, and that would reflect appropriately in the account, and that happened every time. So everything he said was accurate, quote unquote. So I'm thinking, okay, you know what? Like it's what he's saying is turning out to be how it shows up in the account, and everything else, all the above, what I just said. So all of it was just enough to keep me going until it wasn't anymore. So
that's and I want to touch afterwards about how to thank you for the courage you had of coming out on this, right, and sharing with the audience so that other people don't get scammed. But Arda, I just want to share with you, because obviously when this happened, when David reached out to me, I immediately reached out to your CEO. I just need a favor here. We have this situation. Would you guys be willing to help? And obviously, if you and your team at Elliptic were very kindly accepted to do so. Can you maybe share for our audience? I think often there's a misconception. People don't know how traceable cryptocurrencies are. Can you share with our audience, how traceable they are? Let's in the case of Bitcoin, for example, that was the case here. And how you guys are, without obviously revealing your state secrets, how are you able to actually go by and actually be able to identify where wallets and where such funds are heading?
Yeah, to sort of, give an analogy, it's almost as if every single bank transaction between anyone is public and available to see on a big Excel, almost. Criminals like cryptocurrency because they are capable of hiding behind a pseudonymous address. Rather than their name and surname, it's 1BZ47, etc. And also they are capable of sending transactions between each other without interacting with a centralized entity such as a bank, which would be required by laws to, of course, collect their data such as name, surname, address, etc. So that's why criminals are sort of predisposed to this kind of technology. But as you say, Henri, what they sometimes underestimate is that it is very, very easily traceable. Every transaction on the blockchain, on the Bitcoin blockchain, is recorded and can be easily identified, analyzed by anyone. So what we at Elliptic do is we look into criminality, including scams like this one, and it ranges from, for example, terrorist financing to dark web markets, and other sorts of money laundering, etc. And what we do is we identify criminal entities that are using blockchain technologies to make criminal transactions, or to launder their money, or to finance terrorism, or to evade sanctions. And ensure that we have that information in our data set so that when we analyze, for example, the Bitcoin blockchain, we are capable of seeing which entity has transacted to which entity, how, when, etc. So in this particular case, that's what we did when you reached out. We took the Bitcoin addresses to which David, you made the deposits. We then traced exactly what they did with them, and we saw that they made a series of transactions that led to two crypto asset exchanges. I think the total was about $45,000. So that's how much they made through those wallets that you sent to us. So that's what we at Elliptic do, and that is essentially the power of transparency, if you like, on blockchain technology.
I think it's a good point you mentioned, Arda, because I think a lot of people don't realize how much transparency there is, right? In crypto transactions, frankly. And the other thing, maybe for the benefit of our audience, is maybe to give you guys behind the scenes. What happened is after I was able to get the information which exchange it was, I was able to contact that exchange. I'm not going to name it actually for various legal reasons, but let's just say that it's a large crypto exchange that has a presence globally. And unfortunately, that exchange was not willing to come on the show. But basically, what happened is we were able to trace transactions that were there. Unfortunately, after a conversation with the exchange, actually the individuals at the exchange were very kind, and they're friends of ours. And actually, they mentioned that actually the money was immediately spent out. And I can mention it was people in Nigeria actually. So actually, the funds were actually distributed out in these accounts. But the benefit here actually we have is people had to open these accounts. And there's obviously KYC documentation at one point that was made on these individuals who opened these accounts. Now, whether we were able to find the right person, and obviously you need law enforcement involved, which, as you all know, is not very easy in many of these cases, right? Maybe Arda, if you can share a bit about that process as well, because how has been in your experience working with law enforcement? I know many law enforcement agencies use tools like Elliptic, but how easy is it to arrest, let's say, or stop somebody like that? Because obviously, if the exchange has a KYC information and the exchange is cooperative.
Yeah, I mean, it very much varies, of course, depending on law enforcement priorities and exactly how much information they are able to obtain. I mean, if, for example, the information pointed to individuals in Nigeria, and I think one of the two crypto asset exchanges actually that we traced it to, one of them is headquartered in Nigeria. For example, if law enforcement in a different jurisdiction found that out, there's very little, of course, that they can do. It very much depends. So typically, of course, law enforcement and virtual asset services, such as these major crypto asset exchanges, will use tools like Elliptics, basically to ensure that any user of their platform, if they are sending funds into their crypto wallet hosted on that exchange, that money, that crypto is not coming from an illicit source. And of course, they're able to automate that process so they can screen several transactions at once. And if they do get heat of a transaction that is coming from an illicit source, they'll be automatically able to block it. They'll automatically be able to do something about it. In terms of law enforcement, what the process typically would be is that if they use tools such as our one to trace the proceeds of a certain crime to a centralized exchange that collects KYC documentation, they'll be able to subpoena that exchange or go to them and ask for cooperation to then receive the name, the surname, and address, etc., of the individuals that were behind that specific account that received the funds from that criminal endeavor, whatever it might be. We have seen law enforcement and crypto exchanges occasionally work very, very well on that front, quite often actually. So quite recently, we saw major exit scams, such as the Frosties NFT rug pull. That was one that was, I think, a lot of, two individuals stole about $1 million from a lot of investors into this new NFT project. That was then traced down, and those two individuals were recently charged by the US Department of Justice, for example. So it is possible, and it does happen.
Yeah, I think you raise a very good point, Arda, because I think it's just very important for our audience to understand is obviously cryptocurrency transaction, the Bitcoin transaction, for example, are technically anonymous if you go from wallet to wallet, and we can trace it, but we don't know who owns those particular wallets. But at one point, you want to go to the fiat world, and you want to be able to cash them out, which is what these scammers want to do. And that's how normally they get scammed, is they get caught, is when they're using these centralized exchanges where they had to give KYC, KYC actually in particular in this case. And but of course, for that, you need law enforcement who's going after them, was able to subpoena them, and you need crypto exchanges who are cooperative as well, which we all know is not always often the case. So thanks, Arda, for sharing color on that front. David, just want to, as we wrapping the show off, I mean, I just want to, first of all, what gave you the courage to come out? Because there's been many people even Arda mentioned the numbers that were scammed in this case, and obviously you're not the totality. Other people got scammed as well, and here maybe we had the good luck of you had the good sense of actually reaching out to me. But many of the scam people get scammed, unfortunately, do not have my mobile number, for example, right? What gave you the courage to come out? Because it takes a lot of courage. There's a lot of shame associated with these things. What gave you the courage, and what is kind of the one piece of advice you have for our listeners today?
Sure. Well, I feel fortunate that I actually have your contact information, and looking back, I wish I reached out to you right away when they contacted me, and that's a big learning. If you actually know the person that is reaching out to you, pretending to be that person, and they're asking you to do certain things, definitely check with the real person if you actually know them. So, like in your case, anyone that knows you personally and they're being reached out, definitely reach out to you right away somehow, even if it's just on social media or email if they don't have your direct contact information. But your invitation to join you on the podcast, actually knowing you personally, and the hope that others, that we may be able to prevent others from falling victim, is what really encouraged me to join this morning here in San Francisco. On your podcast to be public about this. I am embarrassed about it. I'm upset at myself for not listening to the red flags. And that's really the biggest learning is if you have a gut feeling that something's not right, or if there's anything that just doesn't seem right, especially because I have, this is another factor that played into this, Henri and Arda. Like, I do not I am an option trader and a stock trader. I am not a crypto trader. I did not have experience with crypto trading. And so that played a really big factor in this, because I'm like, oh, I guess this is how it could be. I'm not familiar with this. I'm going to trust this and try to follow this process. Plus whatever he's saying is turning out to be true. So that played a big factor in it. But I still saw red flags, like the contract not having grand investment on it, the fake contract they sent, the emails them sending just being a text email with no images or anything on there at all, no real proper links on there. Those were red flags, which I chose not to follow, because I'm seeing my account becoming hundreds of thousands in gains with just a small investment. And thinking maybe it's Henri, so I fell victim to that. And my hope is that if any of this could be helpful in preventing other victims, that was what brought me here today.
That's great. Thanks for sharing it, David. I really appreciate your courage. I can tell people got scammed or just didn't want to come out, be public about it, which I think for the benefit of our audience, I think you're very courageous what you did. Arda, if there's any piece of advice you have for our audience, right, to avoid such scams and not fall prey to them?
I think the first thing to say, David, you explained very, very well some of the red flags. I think the first thing is, if it's too good to be true, it almost definitely is. It's very important to check exactly who you are interacting with, not just the name, but also the handle, as you pointed out correctly. There were tiny little spelling mistakes in the handle, for example. That's a very, very common tactic. They make it look similar enough that if you just glance at it, you might not notice. It's very important to not get fooled by these crazy returns that they sometimes promise. It's often very, very difficult, of course, to notice some of these red flags. It's much more difficult than a lot of people at home might think. A lot of people at home might say, oh, it's a scam. Of course, who wouldn't? But it's actually very, very difficult in the crypto space, where the scammers are very, very, very sophisticated. A lot of these platforms are incredibly flashy and professional looking. To not look at these and not realize these red flags, or to sort of ignore them when they come, because something else about the scam looks so legitimate that, it's a bit of a weird email. It doesn't matter. The platform I'm investing in looks incredibly legit. So I think to be aware of those red flags, that David you pointed out, and to know that in crypto, if it's too good to be true, it almost definitely is. And of course, to make sure that whatever you're investing in, whatever the company is called, to ensure that it's legitimate. And ensure that it's not registered in some, for example, offshore tax haven or any other red flag indicator like that is, I think, quite important.
It's a good point you mentioned there, Arda, and maybe just for the benefit of, as I mentioned, the particular person at the crypto exchange was not able to come on the show today. The exchange didn't let him, but I think one piece of advice he gave on that side, we want again for the benefit of the audience, was that in the event something happens, do not hesitate to go to law enforcement, because if you go to law enforcement, yes, in many jurisdictions, the speed of execution is not very fast, but they're actually able then, the exchange can actually try to block, like Arda mentioned in cases before, to actually block those accounts before they're too late. Normally, these scammers are pretty quick, right? So as soon as the money hits the exchange, the money leaves pretty quickly, but at least gives them that opportunity to be able to at least slow down or stop and at least freeze the account as well. So that's something, do not hesitate to do it as well. Guys, really appreciate it. I mean, just maybe by way of background as well for our audience, this is unfortunately, the story has a bad ending. It doesn't have a good ending, this podcast episode. And I know it's very different from other episodes that I've done, but this is not stopping here. Obviously, we're continuing. There's been law enforcement accusations that have been put in place right now. There's been complaints. So this is something that we want to pursue and get to the bottom of it. And also, I have to say personally as well, I'm now actually to the point that this is happening so quickly. This last weekend, at the time of recording this, there was 2 fake accounts, new accounts of me that appeared on Instagram and Twitter. And like I mentioned, Arda, often it's a name, especially me with my complicated Armenian name. It's very easy what they do. They add an N, they add two I's, they put a Henri with a Y. So there's various ways of playing it. And this is often how people are getting scammed. And, ironically, often they use Instagram because while I use a lot of platforms professionally, Instagram is a platform that I just use socially. And that's why I don't even have a lot of followers there. And that's the one they often will come in, overnight they'll have 10,000 followers in that fake account. So and they will take every picture that I have on my Instagram. And often the way other people have been able to spot it is they upload all those pictures at the same time. So if a picture that is although 3 years old was uploaded like yesterday, and all my Instagram pictures were in the fake accounts, of course, added yesterday. So that's kind of the stuff that we've seen on it. So again, I'm really, if anybody who's listening to this, it works at Twitter or Instagram, please bring this internally. I've tried everything that I can, from making official requests to even writing the management letters. And now I'm actually considering legal measures as well, just because I'm sick and tired of seeing people as being scammed. And David had the courage to come out today, but I'm sure there's many others who maybe just think I'm a crook right now, because we never actually had this conversation, that they think that they thought they were scammed, or some of them they just thought they made a lot of money right now. And I think many of them, unfortunately, are kind of ashamed. There's a lot of shame when these events happen. So, David, thank you very much for being on the show today. Thank you for sharing your story and having the courage to coming out. I really appreciate it. And on behalf of my audience and my followers as well, thank you very much for sharing your story with all of them. And Arda, I just want to say a big thank you to you, Simon, and the entire team at Elliptic as well, for all the work you guys have done and really coming out and really helping out in this moment. I know you guys are very busy, and I really appreciate all the work that you guys have done in the space. And please continue with the excellent work. I'm a big believer as that crypto moves from 1.0 and 2.0, and the industry becomes more institutionalized. These traceability tools are very important to ensure we keep the bad actors away. And maybe last but not least, David, on behalf of the entire crypto community globally, there's hundreds of millions of us. I really apologize that some of your first experiences with crypto were via these scammers. I guarantee you 99.9% people in this community care about the future of money, care about the future of finance, have good interests. Like Arda, myself, we just want to see this industry grow and really make finance better. And I really apologize that you had some of these scammers that really gave you this bad experience. And I promise you, we'll get back to them. Yeah. Guys, thank you very much, Arda. Thank you very much, David, for joining us today on the Future of Money podcast. And everybody on the show, guys, thank you, Brett, for all the support again, for everybody. Again, this was a very different episode. I know I don't have the bell. I don't have all the fancy and cool things that we do, but I think it's a bit of a sad episode. But I want to make sure that I was very keen that we got this and we shared it with you all. So thank you very much, everybody, and see you all soon for another episode. Hopefully a more exciting one and a bit more joyful one of the Future of Money podcast. Thank you all very much and see you all soon.